What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, November 23rd, 2020, start of a brand new week of utter insanity, chaos, and fraud, lies, deceptions, whatever else they're going to dish up for us. Of course, Thursday is Thanksgiving, and I'm sure you're all making your preparations. For those of you who are going to ignore the orders to skip Thanksgiving because of COVID, which to tell by stories that we've got in our talking points today is most of you here. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about again today. We're going to do mostly news for the first hour. Then we'll open the phone lines in hour number 2 for your comments, questions, observations, and opinions. As usual, Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. So let's just get right on into it. Before I get into the news, though, I want to express a concern. Right now, the effort by corporate media, by government, you'll pardon the expression, experts, all of them, to convince us that this election was honest and fair is failing miserably. In fact, there was a poll last week that found 30% of Democrats did not think the election was honest and fair. So they have not gotten away with this in terms of the public being aware of what happened. And remember, politics is perception, and the perception is the election was stolen and the election was illegitimate. And by extension, that makes the entire government illegitimate, and they're very, very concerned about what they're going to be able to do about that. Well, at this point, it's very obvious no amount of propaganda, no amount of corporate media stories, no amount of screaming conspiracy theorists, tinfoil hat, to any who question the validity of the election is going to change anything. And so I think the deep state is going to look at some kind of a distraction to at least take the election story out of the corporate media, if not independent media. And this being Thanksgiving week, which is a symbolic target here, I'm very concerned that there's going to be some kind of a false flag to be blamed on Iran. It'll have to be something big to be followed by an immediate attack on Iran. And then the corporate media will be all over the war, and the election will be considered yesterday's news, so forth and so on. And I'm not the only person who's out there suggesting that we should be on the guard for something like this, because if I were in the deep state, it's what I would be thinking of doing right about now. All right, so getting on to the individual stories here. Apparently, new data from a rigorous statistical analysis continues to point out at voter fraud in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. And basically, the data examined a highly anomalous update to mail vote totals in the New York Times Edison data, which enormously benefit Biden and looks very suspicious in a number of aspects here. The results are suggestive of a new and highly suspicious batch of mail ballots being added to the count sometime between Wednesday early morning and Thursday morning. And the ballots are drawn from an implausible distribution that enormously favored Biden and simultaneously harmed Trump. Okay? Now, the mail-in ballots ended up being extremely different, both from the mail ballots that came before and the mail ballots that came afterwards. And the article supplies some evidence to back that up. Okay, new data is showing that 160,000 people are recorded as having voted in both Pennsylvania and Michigan. And apparently in Pennsylvania, 40,000 voters were switched from Republican to Democrat. And again, all very, very suspicious. Now, as you're probably already aware, at the end of last week, a federal judge in Pennsylvania dismissed a lawsuit brought by the Trump campaign asking that the vote certification process in Pennsylvania be halted. And the judge dismissed the case with prejudice, which means it cannot be refiled. But that's okay, because that's opened the door to taking the lawsuit up to the United States Supreme Court. And Donald Trump was out there on his Twitter feed saying, we will appeal, and apparently the appeal has already been filed. And Trump is out there saying that basically they opened the door to the Supreme Court, And Giuliani explained that the expedited dismissal helps file an expedited appeal and get the matter to the Supreme Court in a timely manner. So we'll see what's going to happen there. I'm half expecting all of the justices on the Supreme Court to be anonymously mailed a copy of the DVD of Pelican Brief as a warning here. This one is coming out of amgreatness.com. Something rotten in Pennsylvania, and they're talking about this story that was published October 29th in the Philadelphia Inquirer, saying that election officials in several Pennsylvania counties were debating how to alert voters that their mail-in ballot might not meet state requirements. And they were trying to help voters fix mail-in ballots that would be disqualified, and everybody was sort of going on their own. In one case, one county sent the flawed ballots back to the voters to be corrected. But there's a bigger story behind this. Election officials clearly violated the law by inspecting mail-in ballots before November 3rd. According to Pennsylvania's election laws, county election boards are required to safely keep the ballots in sealed or locked containers until pre-canvassing legally began at 7 a.m. on Election Day. So they were opening those ballots early, trying to get them corrected, sending them back for corrections, all of which was against Pennsylvania election law. All righty. Data scientist Sarah Eaglesfield says the cluster of Wayne County votes, came from a mental hospital for severely ill people. And I suppose the obvious joke there is only crazy people would vote for Joe Biden here. But apparently this Sarah Eaglesfield is on Twitter, or at least was initially. She's been looking at the data from Wayne County, Michigan, and basically saying that cluster votes for Biden came from a hospital for severely mentally ill people. So they were harvesting those ballots any way they could get. Now, apparently, California may actually be back in play because apparently in 53 of 58 counties, the election was conducted outside the standards of Division 13, Chapter 3, ballot printing specifications. And it's quite clear in the election code section that the ballots had to conform to a certain standard. And apparently in most of the California counties, they did not. Okay, over in Georgia, Trump has requested a Georgia recount, meaning that 5 million votes will be tabulated a third time. Hopefully there will be observers, because remember, we had that report from a whistleblower that they were simply reporting the original vote totals as the totals from the recount. Of course, it's going to come out exactly the same here, but they're going to recount a third time. And there were some 5 million votes cast. Joe Biden won by only 12,670 votes, or 0.26 percentage points. And state law says a candidate that's within half a percentage point can ask for a recount within 2 business days of certification. So Trump has gone ahead and do that. Also in Georgia, analyzing the data coming on in here, apparently there was a 23,000 batch of votes that came in at 12:18 a.m. 98% or more of those were for Biden. And that is a statistic, shall we say, anomaly. Now, Sidney Powell is out there saying that the Republican Governor Kemp of Georgia was paid to use Dominion voting machines. And again, we know that Dominion was being forced on a lot of states. In some states, the watchdogs, if you were saying we can't certify these, they're not reliable, and they were overruled and the machines were put into use here. Out in Nevada, final tally there is showing there were over 77,000 more votes than actual ballots. And that is another indication that something is wrong with this election. I mean, the election is already completely discredited. regardless of who you're voting for. The issue has to be whether we, the American people, still have a say in how this country is run. And what we're being told constantly, again, by corporate media is, no, you don't. Just pretend that you do. And there's another article. This one is from the Gateway Pundit, and it's going after Tucker Carlson and Fox News, saying that President Trump and his team have more than enough solid evidence to prove their case, and they list quite a bit of it in the article. Now, at issue, of course, is Tucker Carlson's rant with Sidney Powell over, what evidence might be there. And Tucker Carlson is now trying to backpedal from that, saying that this is what the Fox News attorneys told him. Another article here, this one from justthenews.com, listing a dozen compelling allegations of voting irregularities in the 2020 election. And again, the election is obviously fraudulent. Paul Craig Roberts is out there writing that the Democrats have stolen the presidential election. And it was only a few months ago that the polls made it look like Trump was going to win his second term hands down. And now there's this close race and a lot of shenanigans. And Paul Craig Roberts is saying, what happened? Well, vote fraud happened here. And he points out that in the months before the election, the Democrats used the COVID pandemic to put in place voting by mail. And the argument was used that people who safely go to supermarkets and restaurants would catch COVID if they stood in voting lines. And voting by mail is subject to massive vote fraud. They did it during Lincoln's re-election campaign, trying to defeat him. Now, over the weekend, the Trump campaign and Rudy Giuliani issued a strange statement saying that Sidney Powell was not part of Trump's official team, legal team, on the election, and that she was acting entirely on her own. And people were kind of wondering what was going on because Sidney Powell stood up there for that big press conference last Tuesday, and it was only a few weeks ago that Trump said that she was part of his team. So we're kind of wondering what's going on. She's not being fired. She's simply being disconnected. And Sidney Powell herself is saying, I understand today's press release. I will continue to represent we the people who had their votes for Trump and other Republicans stolen by massive fraud through Dominion and Smartmatic, and we will be filing suit soon. The chips will fall where they may. We will defend the foundations of the great republic. Sidney Powell is out there saying, we now have evidence. They gave 35,000 extra votes to every Democrat candidate right off the ballot, right off the bat. And that would certainly change things around. Another article coming on out from Hideout Now. Sidney is staying the course to prove the massive deliberate election fraud. And Sidney is confirming non-affiliation with the Trump legal team, vows to continue the fraud fight. Sidney Powell has smoking gun evidence to prove massive election fraud in the next 2 weeks. Now, the story saying that Sidney Powell is appearing on Joe Rogan, Brandon Tatum, Tim Pool, and Ben Shapiro. Okay, so what exactly is going on with Sidney Powell? And here is my theory, and it is only a theory, that the Trump legal team is spinning her off to operate independently, so that if some court hands down some kind of an injunction to tell the Trump legal team to stop doing what they're doing, Sidney Powell would still be free to continue her independent lawsuit. That seems to be about the only thing that makes sense with this sudden announcement that she's not part of the legal team and Sidney Powell not arguing the matter. So that's my theory. All right, now Michael Flynn Jr. Is releasing more information on Trump team Sidney Powell's statement, and he's saying it's not what you think. And he's saying it is not a message of disappointment in her latest actions. And again, this supports my theory that she's being spun off as an independent ahead of a possible blanket injunction by some corrupt judge telling the Trump legal team to cease and desist here. Now, Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard law professor emeritus, says that Donald Trump still has several constitutional paths to victory. And for example, in Pennsylvania, they have two very strong legal arguments. One, that the courts changed what the legislature did about counting ballots after the end of Election Day. That's a winning issue in the Supreme Court. Okay? So the team, meanwhile, has a winning issue in the Supreme Court on equal protection, that some counties allowed flawed ballots to be counted, cured while others did not. Bush versus Gore suggests that an equal protection argument can prevail. So we'll see. It does look like it's going to go to the Supreme Court, though. Lou Dobbs is out there sounding the warning that the Republican Party will be gone and done if they don't stand with President Trump. And that is one of the most alarming things that we are hearing about this election. It's almost like the United States is heading to a one-party nation like the former Soviet Union. And we already know that the Democrats and the liberals are all in favor of socialism, communism, and some other real extreme issues there. And so, again, this is a fight not just for Donald Trump. It's a fight for Americans' ability to control the government to some extent. And it's a fight for the future of the entire Republican Party itself. Now, Mark Levin is out there saying that letting Trump's legal efforts play out is a far better option than what the Democrats are trying to do to our institutions to shut the whole thing down. And he's absolutely right. Trump's legal team is obeying the law and the Constitution, and it must be allowed to play out. All righty. Now, apparently, a legislative leader in Michigan basically said that Trump did not, in fact, ask for any interference in the election. House Speaker Lee Chatfield was among 7 GOP legislators who met with Trump for about an hour on Friday, trying to basically talk about, reversing some of the election fraud. And he was saying that there was this outrage. The president was going to ask us to break the law, but it simply did not happen. So it was another bit of fake news that was being put out by the corporate media. Let's see. We already talked about the mental illness issue here. Michigan House Speaker says a constitutional crisis could still overturn Biden's victory in the state. And it's unclear exactly what they're talking about. But apparently Aaron Rupar, who's a very liberal journalist, shared the video. So we may see a constitutional crisis over there in Michigan. Down in Georgia, Trump supporters are threatening to destroy the GOP and boycott the runoff elections. Folks, that would be a mistake because the Democrats are pouring people into the state to try and steal those last 2 Senate seats. They're not going to give up now. They've gone way too far. Okay. Russian leader Vladimir Putin is out there saying that he will not recognize Joe Biden as the winner of the U.S. presidential election because his victory has not been acknowledged by Trump. And again, as we pointed out, the constitutional process has not run its course. Now, if Trump gets this case into the Supreme Court, and it looks like it's going to happen, if the Supreme Court concludes that the election had an irredeemable amount of fraud, then the election gets thrown into the House of Representatives where Trump will win. Now, out in California, in their 21st district, although the returns are not finalized, it is looking like former Republican Representative Dave Valadao has won a rematch with his 2018 contest with Democrat Representative T.J. Cox. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercial, and we'll be right back.
And get
Welcome back to our show here. And again, a friendly reminder that the Republic Broadcasting Network really, really needs your support right now. We are in a fight for the future of the Republic, for the future of the American people, maintaining control over this government. We're in a fight for the life of the Republican Party. And we're in a fight for the continuance of independent media, which is no doubt going to be attacked and taken down under a Biden presidency. So first of all, a heartfelt thank you to those of you who have already donated. And for those of you who have not donated, the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. And of course, all of this information, phone numbers and addresses are up at the top of republicbroadcasting.org, the website for Republic Broadcasting. So you can find it there if you didn't grab your pencil soon enough here. Getting on back to the election news, this one's a little bit alarming, and I think it's an indicator of just how widespread the corruption is inside the government. According to station gossip, the FBI is not investigating any voter fraud claims in the 2020 presidential election. They're just sitting back there and, you know, probably playing computer games on those taxpayer-funded computers, but they're not doing anything to find out what happened. And that, to me, is a very damning indictment of the FBI. Of course, we've known about the reality of the FBI going back all the way to COINTELPRO here. Getting on to the non-election political news here, Biden is already appointing members of his cabinet here. And according to this article in antiempire.com, he's planning to make the American empire great again. And apparently Biden, during the campaign, railed against Trump's America First foreign policy, claiming it weakened the United States and left the world in disarray. And Biden is pledging to reverse the decline and recover the damage Trump did to America's reputation. Well, that stolen election is not a good start on that one, Joe. All righty. So Biden seeks to make the American empire great again. And Biden's said, tonight the whole world is watching America, and I believe at our best, America is a beacon for the globe. We will lead not only by the example of our power, but by the power of our example, which sounds like the Warhawks are definitely back in charge this time. Anyway, getting on back to Biden and his cabinet, apparently Tony Blinken is to be named as Secretary of State, and Michelle Flournoy will be Secretary of Defense. Now, interestingly, an alleged fact checker has come forward, blow the whistle, basically saying that Facebook is using third-party companies, freelance contractors, to do the censoring. And the whistleblower said he worked for a company named Appen. They're a third-party freelance contract company. And a few years ago, Facebook approached them with an offer. And he said he couldn't legally censor people on his platform because he pled to Congress it was an open forum. So he uses several third-party companies as fact checkers. In other words, to censor information. Now, another story came through here today. If you've seen all the spam about Joe Biden won, Joe Biden won, Joe Biden won, that apparently is part of Facebook's fact-checking process, if you will, to convince everybody that Biden won his election fairly and honestly. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, it really isn't working. And this next story supports my concern about a false flag followed by a major war. Apparently, the U.S. military deployed B-52 bombers to the Middle East Saturday, just days after Trump announced a partial withdrawal from Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, the U.S. Central Command said the Air Force B-52H Stratofortress air crews conducted the mission on short notice to deter aggression and reassure U.S. partners and allies. So the bombers are there heading into the Middle East to do who knows what. But I presume it involves dropping bombs. Okay, apparently yesterday, in a first for both Israel and Saudi Arabia, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And the Middle East is definitely reshaping, and Netanyahu's definitely getting a lot of stuff that he wanted. Now, Jonathan Pollard has been freed from his parole restrictions. He was released from prison a while ago, but he's now been freed from all parole restrictions and will be allowed to move to Israel, where it can be assured he will be treated as a returning hero. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and getting out into the international news here. There's an organization, it's part of the United Nations. It's called Save the Children. And recently, ahead of its donor conference in Geneva, Save the Children declared Afghanistan one of the world's most dangerous countries for children. They're saying an average of 5 children are killed or injured every single day in Afghanistan. And since 2005, more than 26,000 children have been killed or injured in Afghanistan. And I'm sure the war hawks will say, well, it's a price we're willing to pay here. Tell that to the parents here. Over in Paris, a lot of protests going on all over the world, all over Europe here. And apparently there was a protest in Paris in response to the so-called Global Security Bill that made it a crime to take and distribute pictures of law enforcement. Well, apparently the riot police more or less joined the protest. They removed their helmets so that their faces could be seen and photographs. So apparently this one is not doing very well. Alrighty, the Eurozone economy has plunged back into severe decline after new coronavirus lockdowns. And I'm starting to think that the reason they're still pounding on coronavirus is because the economy globally was going to crash anyway due to the private central banks. And now they've got something they can blame it on. Oh, the economy was doing fine. But that gosh darn virus here, don't blame corrupt bankers and politicians here. It was all the virus who did it here. According to the latest survey by the research firm IHS Markit, both the flash Eurozone composite output and services activity purchasing managers indices hit their lowest levels since May. So things are not going good in the Eurozone, same as they are not going well here. I know the stock market had a really good day today, but the stock market has become completely disconnected from the everyday mom and pop Main Street America economic realities. And we're seeing businesses closing and people being let go. And it's very, very dark times. They're already talking about Great Depression version 2.0. Anyway, getting on back to COVID-19 here. Over in Great Britain, their public health director is calling for Christmas to be postponed for 6 months. And it almost seems like the woke crowd wants to use COVID to get rid of our traditional holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving, the same as they've gotten rid of statues and monuments and various other reminders of our historical past here. Now, over in New York, the sheriff says he will not enforce Governor Cuomo's Thanksgiving restrictions in homes. And Cuomo was just on Fox News a few minutes ago, basically saying that any law enforcement officer who refuses to enforce his dictate is in violation of their constitutional duty. So we'll see how that's going to shake out. Down in New Jersey, one of their police chiefs is saying they will not enforce the governor's coronavirus order, limiting holiday gatherings to 10 people because it's detrimental to our relationship with the community. And I would tend to agree. That's not what the police are for. Los Angeles County has shut down all dining as of Wednesday. which means if you were in Los Angeles and thinking of having your Thanksgiving dinner out at a restaurant, well, you need to change your plans right now. Remember all those protests we've been seeing in Europe about the lockdown? It is finally starting to happen here. Apparently, Californians are defying Governor Newsom's curfew order, and there were protests in 16 different cities last Saturday. And they were carrying Trump-Pence flags and Open Up California banners. So people are really tired of this stuff. They're not even really sure what this coronavirus is all about. We're hearing all this talk about inflated numbers and false positives, and none of the, CDC claims they don't actually have an isolated instance of the actual virus this is all being blamed on. Now, there is, for those of you seeking to move, there is one county in the entire United States that is COVID-free. No COVID at all. And this is on the island in Hawaii of Molokai, and it's the county where the leper colony was established 155 years ago, and it's very hard to get at. But apparently their isolation is working in their favor because they don't have any COVID at all. Now, a former officer, Dr. Peter Goetsch of the Cochrane Institute, is out there saying that this second wave doesn't exist, that the numbers are being generated on the basis of false positive tests. And we know that that has been a problem with these tests since the very, very beginning. Remember what Elon Musk went through. He had 4 tests in one day, 2 were positive, 2 were negative. He came down with something, we're not exactly sure what, but whatever it is, he's over it very, very quickly, which suggests it was an ordinary flu. Now, a logistics expert has come on out saying that COVID-19 marks the end of globalization, which would be a good thing. And they're saying that that COVID-19 is making national supply chains critical infrastructure, and they're absolutely correct about that. We're already seeing at our local food market, local hardware store, there are things that they have not been able to get in for months now, and they're not sure when they're going to get them back in. So we're starting to see empty shelves out here in Santa Claus, Indiana. We saw them the last time we went to Walmart, big holes on the shelves there. So already it's starting to really, really break down. All righty. Apparently, the White House is planning a new trade alliance. Remember, last week it came on out that China and a bunch of Asian countries formed this huge trading bloc, lowered tariffs, ease of crossing borders, to which the United States was not invited. And so the Trump administration is going to list 89 Chinese aerospace and other companies that would be unable to access U.S. technology exports. And they're going to restrict companies from buying American goods and technologies and try and form a trade alliance with other countries, not including China. Little tit for tat going there, like schoolboys in the sandbox having a fight over whose dog is ugliest. Apparently, there is talk in the United Arab Emirates of withdrawing from OPEC. Now, OPEC has suffered immensely under the pandemic and the subsequent drop in oil demand. And apparently, members are mulling the pros and cons of staying with the group and wondering if they should go along with curbing production to try and drive prices back up. But apparently on Friday, rumors surfaced that the UAE was seriously looking at leaving OPEC. All righty, now the dollar is losing to the euro as the payment currency for the first time in years. And apparently the euro was the most used currency for global payments in October. And the first time it has outpaced the dollar since February of 2013. And so people are turning away from the dollar because the United States has weaponized the banking system. Now, getting on to immigration news here, apparently Mexican people smugglers are celebrating the end of Trump and say a surge of immigrants in anticipation of a Biden administration is already underway. Apparently on Election Day, around 30 undocumented immigrants, mostly from Central America, crowded into a small room at the back of a house near the U.S.-Mexican border belonging to El Cuate, a prolific people smuggler. And they were following the news carefully, believing that their futures depended on the outcome. And of course, I'm sure they'll all be loyal Democratic voters once they get into the country. Joe Biden is saying that he will admit and grant permanent status to immigrants who go on food stamps and Medicaid. So I don't know how that's going to work with his promise to not raise taxes on the middle class, because the rich aren't going to want to have taxes raised on them. They'll start taking steps to hide their income and the rest of it. And apparently Biden has already broken his promise on not raising taxes on the middle class with his plan for a new tax on firearms ownership, where every year that you own a gun, you will have to pay a hefty tax on it. And they're talking billions of dollars in revenues being generated by this. But again, as far as I can see, it is an infringement on the right to keep and bear arms. Getting on back to immigration, Trump is considering an executive action targeting birthright citizenship in his final weeks in office. Now, birthright citizenship is the policy whereby anyone who's born in the U.S. is immediately granted citizenship, regardless of whether their parents are citizens or not. It's guaranteed under the 14th Amendment that states in part, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. Now, more than 30 countries, mostly in the Western Hemisphere, have birthright citizenship. But we see in this country how it has definitely been abused, where immigrants will come over the border, plop out what's called an anchor baby, and then they can't be sent back home again. All right, in other news around here, down in Alabama, the former owner of an Alabama testing lab was sent to prison last week for falsifying drug test results that prosecutors say cost multiple parents custody of their children. And Brandy Murrah, 37, was sentenced on November 12th to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty in September to 1 felony charge of perjury and 16 misdemeanor counts of forgery. And in one case, a mother had her child taken away from her when the drug lab claimed they'd found meth in her blood samples. And it turned out she was clean. She didn't do drugs. And I have no idea why this owner of this drug lab would do these things, but apparently they did here. Now, getting on back to the right to keep and bear arms here, Google searches for reloading ammo are up because of the nationwide shortage of ammunition. And it's, it's panic shopping here, but not toilet paper. They're learning more about reloading ammunition, something black powder shooters are already familiar with. And ever since the first round of virus lockdowns in March, ammunition prices have surged because of unprecedented demand. And apparently there is talk in the future Biden administration about a tax on ammunition as well, along with having to have a background check just for ammunition. And some of the hardest ammunition to find is 9mm. So people are looking at reloading, and it's a skill. but you can actually come out with more accurate ammunition than what comes out of those factories. Meanwhile, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which was founded back in 1961, reported a week ago there are an estimated 434 million firearms in private possession in the United States of America. And the purchases have surged in the last year, partly because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also because of the political uncertainties, including the possibility of a very liberal incoming administration. All righty, now there was a virtual town hall talking about how the pandemic is going to change admissions to high-performing selective schools. And apparently, New York City officials got a lecture on systemic racism, saying that it's racist to have merit-based admissions. Okay, and apparently along with white people being singled out for this, apparently Asians are now being targeted because they're excellent academic performers. But apparently Ayana Behin, president of the school district council, basically said it's our recommendation they prioritize the end of racial segregation in the schools. All right, I think everybody should have equal access to education, but some students are just going to do better than others. And, I kind of went through this myself many years ago when I taught remedial math at the high school level. Because, if I'm flying on an airplane, I don't want the pilot to be the C student who got in because of an ethnic checklist. If I'm being operated on, I don't want the doctor to be a C student who got into medical school because they fit into that little sorting jig about, ethnic groups and so forth. All righty. Apparently, the Ring doorbell coming from Amazon, and apparently they have issued a recall for 350,000 of their smart doorbells sold in the US and Canada because apparently they have a bad habit of overheating and bursting into flame. So, I mean, wow, don't they test these things before they put them on the market? I mean, that is really bad here. Okay, let me get a message to our control room here. We were talking about the Arecibo Space Telescope in Puerto Rico. It suffered failure of some of the main support cables that hold that receiving, transmitting platform high in the air over the dish. And it's been decided that it really cannot be repaired. And so apparently operations were halted last August, and they're basically going to demolish the scope. But because of that bowl-shaped valley that it's built in, I assume that a new one will be built in its place. I hope there will, although the Chinese have built one similar in design that's 3 times as large. Okay, we're going to open the phone lines now. Area code 512-248-8252, and we'll start taking calls after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and the phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252, and we're going to go to Al in Canada. Hello, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. What's on my mind is, number one, coronavirus. I just found out today that the city I live in is going to go into lockdown next Monday.
Okay.
Toronto's already in lockdown. I know someone that works in the government, and they were told that they're going to lock down on Monday, so in a week.
Okay.
So why wasn't I notified of this? I mean, who's controlling? Like, who actually pulls the strings in this country? Obviously not the taxpayer, Mike.
Nope.
No. Also, another something to do with the coronavirus. On the CBC, the state-sponsored propaganda website that the taxpayers are on the hook for, $30 for every man, woman, and child every year, and probably even more than that now.
Mm-hmm.
Under business, it says there's a radio show. It's called Never Mind the Deficit. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of it. Canada is spending, and Canada is not spending. The government is. Canada is spending a tremendous amount of money to get the country through COVID-19 pandemic, but a growing movement says we can shed our old worries about federal deficit. Modern monetary theory argues that since we control our own currency, the country can create more money and never go broke.
Yes. And then you're in Zimbabwe
that's worked out in other countries great. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
hang on a second.
Number one, they call it money.
Yeah.
And then they admit that it's currency. Money is a store of value. Exactly what you've said for years and years and years and years. It's a store of value, and it's a function of an asset that can be saved, retrieved, and exchanged at a later time and be predictably useful when retrieved. In other words, it doesn't depreciate in value.
No.
It's a store of value.
Yes.
So what these idiots, and I think I know what this is all about. So all of this cash that a lot of the governments around the world have been given or infused into their countries, individual countries, has come from their central banks. Some of these central banks are privately owned, like yours, the Federal Reserve, and some of them aren't. Like up here in Canada, well, apparently it's not. So as you have already explained so many times, if a country creates its own currency and the government can access that currency at a low interest rate or 0% interest rate, it's a lot better than going to private banks, which Canada has been doing since the mid-'70s because of getting into that
I got to put you on hold.
Yes.
I got to put you on hold. We got to take a break for station identification. Don't hang up. We'll come right back to you. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252, and we're talking with Al in Canada, and we're talking about the Bank of Canada, which is ostensibly owned by the government, but could be privately controlled. And Al, you were telling us about this strange machination where the Canadian government stopped availing itself of ultra-low interest loans from the Bank of Canada and started seeking higher interest loans from private institutions and dropping the interest charges on the Canadian taxpayer.
Yeah, that happened in the mid-'70s when Trudeau, Pierre Trudeau, got us into the G7. It was one of the stipulations. All the G7 countries did the same thing. And one of the big ones, besides, like your country's always had that, well, not always, in 100 years, you've had that Federal Reserve. But France used to create its own currency, right? And then spend it into existence, much the same way that Canada did it. And Marie Le Pen is a big proponent of that sort of thing.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, at one point she was picked up and thrown into the loony bin, wasn't she?
Yeah, I think so. They were trying to discredit her.
Oh, big time. So anyways, so now we have, so this, you know, they're talking about this big reset and, you know, all this jazz. And of course, this all ties together. And I don't mind this as far as governments being able to go to their own to their own central banks instead of private banks, which basically just, you know, create the currency out of thin air. They borrow it from the central bank at, you know, like 0.25%, and they turn around and charge 7%, which is, you know, just disgraceful, especially for a government to allow something like that to happen. So in one way, if this is what they're talking about, then this is actually a better thing. But I don't really think this is what they're talking about. I think they're just trying to, because there's no way that any country can create their own currency out of thin air into infinity and not actually do something with it constructive that has value, you know, like highways, high-speed rail, whatever it is, right, Mike?
Yes.
And not just bailing out the idiots and the rich people and whoever else and getting people, you know,
not to mention the cost of war.
Smoke pot all day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think this reset that has come out now. People should really start to think about it and talk about it, because it's obviously right around the corner.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Your government is at what, 27 trillion? That's the
Yes.
federal government.
Yes.
And of course, I don't know how many states are in trouble, but I suspect probably 15 or 20 of them, right?
I would say probably closer to 40.
Ooh. And that's public pensions, I would assume.
Yes. Well, partly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They can't fund the public pensions because, they were hollowed out in 2000, 2009, and now. Right? And that's just in the last 20 years.
That's why Nancy Pelosi was holding back the next COVID assistance bill, with a provision that some of these state pension funds be bailed out. And, of course, that's a major sticking point because, those states got themselves into trouble. And it's really not up to the Fed to get them out of trouble. And it's got nothing whatsoever to do with the impact of COVID-19 on ordinary American citizens.
No, it isn't. It's just a front to be used, and we're going to see how it's going to all play out.
Yes.
Anyway, that's all I had to say and offer. I'm looking forward to hear some other callers. Thanks, Mike.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call, and we have another caller, Steve Elkins. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi there, Mike. I was just thinking about this. Of course, we understand that the bottom line, the main premise of the whole COVID scandemic was about a digital, economic collapse in a digital currency, a reset, a digital currency coming. I started thinking about it, and it's going to happen. We're going to start seeing. Matter of fact, I just did a radio show up in Colorado today, and a couple of experts, medical experts. We talked about COVID quite a bit, but they were telling me also what's going on, and they agreed that this was a global economic reset. So I asked them out there in England, are you seeing the commercials yet that they are putting out there saying that the currency, the paper currency, is contaminated, it is filthy, it changes from hand to hand, and that there's an association, there's COVID contamination with the currency, then therefore pushing a digital currency? And they said, yeah, that's happened a while back. I anticipate that's coming here a while back, but it should be coming here. I assume that's going to be the ploy they take to push the digital currency. So the digital currency, let's say it takes...
You need to remember, though...
Let's say the digital currency takes place and we have no currency, hardback currency anymore. You talked about the firearms and Beto O'Rourke. Of course, we know he wants to take all the firearms.
Before we go to the firearms, though, I want to remind everybody that the formula for the paper, which is used for U.S. paper notes. Now, obviously, I don't have the complete formula, but it is known that it contains an antibacterial component. So, the old joke, germs couldn't, live on money. No, they don't. And that's been around for quite a long time.
Yeah. Well, they're going to rely on the ignorance of the people. I mean, they're pretty easy to fool everybody on these things they do. So we get to the digital currency. It flies. We have a digital currency, and then they put out this voluntarily telling you that they notify you and say that you have a firearm. You have 5 firearms. Therefore, you must pay a tax for each firearm to legally keep them, because I think this is where it's going.
Yes.
And you say, why resist? Well, they control the digital currency. They can dip into your account and simply withdraw the yearly fees from your account.
Yes.
I'm at a frustration right now, Mike, in that Democrats handle their problems like the spoiled child. They cry, they scream, they loot, they burn down cities, they threaten people. We, the intelligent Republicans or independents, that I am an independent, how do we end up pushing back on these people with what's about to come? That's been my biggest frustration, is saying, what do we do if they control the money system, the digital currency, and you don't comply? They just simply take it out of your accounts. I don't know. There's got to be something that we can do collectively.
No, I thought we were all pushing back
the
during the 2020 election, but we've learned a hard lesson on that one.
Yeah. But if they have the digital currency and they have access to our accounts, we can say no to everything they say, but they'll simply just take it out of your account anyway.
Yes. Well, they've had the ability to do that, for some time now. They don't advertise it because they're afraid of how people would react to that knowledge. But yeah, if the government comes into a bank and says, give me a couple of hundred out of this person's account, it's going to be gone.
Right. That's it for me, Mike. It's just a frustration I have. I mean, I want to push back, and I'm not going to go the violent route unless I'm threatened myself personally, but there's got to be something collectively we can do to push back to say no to this.
Well, again, I don't support the violence route. A big part of why I stuck with doing this for a quarter of a century was to head off the idea of a civil war in this country, although I'm seeing so many people talk about it now. I still think, though, that our current government is not going to survive its own corruption and its own economic mismanagement. And I think if we really do have a Depression version 2.0, the people aren't going to stand with the government the way they did back in the 1930s, especially after the 2020 election, where even 1/3 of Democrats know that something funny was going on.
Right. That's true. That's it. Have a great show, Mike. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch out to Peter in Los Angeles. Hello, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I'd like to talk about two things, actually. The first is the deal with the meritocracy.
Yes.
And can you hear? That's been going on for such a long time. I have a neighbor who's highly educated Asian guy, and his wife's highly educated. They make good money. Both have masters or above. And I kept telling him for years. I've been telling this guy for years that the effort to come at, and I look upon this as basically, and I'm being kind when I use the word Zionist instead of the J word, but it really is the J word. Coming after the war against whites, which they're clearly doing by weaponizing black people, telling them the untruths about the way law enforcement and the crime numbers, all that stuff. But they've also targeted us in affirmative action and all these hiring quotas and everything. That, by the way, the Jews come in and they'll take up the white quota, and then we're left to fend for ourselves. But I keep telling him, I have told him for years, sent this to him this morning, that that the Asian community, which is growing pretty quick, the demographics, which is highly educated, which is highly upwardly mobile, which are stick together and make a lot of money, that they're not going to allow a demographic.
They've got a great work ethic.
Yeah, they do, and they raise the bar for everybody, and more power to them. But they're the powers that be, the powers that be that have made war on basically European Americans aren't going to sit still and watch this educated, achieving, affluent group with greater numbers than their own be unscathed. And here we go. It's happening. They're attacking them too.
They're attacking the Asians.
And it was inevitable, right? Any threat to them, and they look upon us as number one in the United States, and in the United States they're number two. A cohesive, educated, affluent group that achieves. They want to they want to edge them out. Secondly, I wanted to talk about I wanted to talk about the moves that Trump has made replacing Esper.
Okay, before we go into that, though, I have a little anecdote from the Rodney King riots back in Los Angeles. I was living in LA at the time, and it was kind of interesting when the rioting and the burning was going on. It was mostly, convenience stores operated by Asians. Because they were doing very well, they were making money, and it sort of put to the lie this claim that the blacks were confined to an area where it was impossible to make a good living. And so those stores all got targeted.
Yeah, Mike, I think the numbers are 2,400 Korean American businesses, or Asian American, mostly Korean, got burned down in the inner city and targeted by basically the black mobs. And by the way, 30 years later, they don't call a pogrom of that magnitude a hate crime, because of course black people are incapable of doing a hate crime. Right.
Yes.
But let me go on and say about the raid that supposedly got this server in Germany that was done by military intelligence, the DIA, which is the services, Office of Naval Intelligence, Army Intelligence, Air Intelligence, so on and so forth, and by Special Operations Command. I thought it was interesting when I heard that it was Special Operations that did that, because at the same time Trump elevated them bureaucratically. They were a major command underneath the Army Chief of Staff, but now they are. And by the way, going back to when the White House had to be evacuated, when the mobs were actually threatening them in June or July. And Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and Esper both denied Trump's request in a D.C. District of Columbia federal area to bring in federal troops to guard the White House. Do you remember that?
I remember that.
So Trump's saying, well, geez, if I can't rely on this guy or these people in the chain, then changes have to be made. Well, the Special Operations Command was elevated to equal bureaucratic status of Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. So now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs does not have command authority. So Milley does not have command authority over Special Operations. He's just the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is the principal military advisor to the president under the Nichols reforms in the 80s. And also the Esper is gone now too. So in other words, to keep things classified and a little more compartmentalized, it's almost a direct reporting relationship to the Secretary of Defense and Trump. And by the way, one of the things that we've talked about here is this is what we're dealing with here in the United States is, will basically the banker, media, Jewish billionaires, and the secret police, the CIA and the FBI, control the country in the elections, or and who's more powerful, they or the Constitution and the rule of law? Well, one of the things that they have going for them, the bad guys, who can print money out of nothing, and also have the secret police who can kill anybody anywhere in the world. That's the biggest carrot you can think of, the money out of nothing, and the biggest stick that you can think of, being able to kill anybody, and obviously also the blackmail and surveillance capability they have. Well, now Trump has sort of redressed that, because Special Operations Command, that's where they get their killers from. And so all these direct action guys, all these guys are Delta and SEAL and all, they're the guys that carry out. The CIA is a very small special operations branch that actually is paramilitary. But we have an enormous special operations thing. And by the way, with chain of command, with the military as commander-in-chief, Trump has precedence there. And also, I think for ethics, I think they would go with the rule of law, the military generally, the rank and file guys.
Most military I know are strict constitutionalists.
Yeah, that's my read too, Mike. And so I just wanted to bring that up. But it's a very formidable group we're up against, who can print money out of nothing, and also tear down anybody. And they have different levels, by the way, of intimidation. They can get Antifa and Black Lives Matter to go, and they can dox you. They can go to your home. They can beat your kids. They can do on that level, and they can escalate it to all the intercepts. They can smear you. They can plant things on your computer. They can do all the things, and they can kill you. Well, it's a pretty bad combination to beat. So that's just my comment for the day, Mike. But It's a really interesting laboratory. Does the rule of law and the Constitution trump, the biggest stick and the biggest carrot with all the power that these billionaire media guys and billionaire bankers have? It's going to be interesting, along with the secret police, to see who wins out on this. But that's it for me, Mike. I've talked too long.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot, Peter. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Mark, I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, a couple of things. One is I'm in a pissed off mood today. Boy, I was at the gym working out, and a manager comes there, female manager, and she's telling everybody they've got to wear a mask now while working out because there's piece of crap governor here, Cooper, passed a new mask mandate saying that that you got to wear your mask even while working out. So I mean, that's what can I say? People just got to start refusing. She said they threaten to close down the gyms if they don't comply. So people's got to start refusing. Period. This is going too far. They're pushing us too far, Mike. They really are.
I agree.
And that brings me back to what you were talking about and what I was talking to you last week about. The way I look at it right now, you look at the seizure of that machine there in Germany.
Yeah. All right, Mark, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We got to take a break for commercial, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Mark in North Carolina. And Mark, you were talking about doubts about the virus and people are being pushed too far. And, from what I'm reading in my email and seeing out there on the independent media, a lot of people are very angry. This has gone on way too long. It was only supposed to be a few weeks of lockdown. That was in March. And now here we are coming up on Thanksgiving Day, and they're still locking us down. And, initially it was, drive people into mail-in voting so the election could be stolen. Now I think they're keeping it going to sort of get us used to just doing what we're told, and also to have something to blame the global economic crash on.
Yeah, but, see, these people are not that smart. They're really not that smart because they don't understand. This is not Germany. And even Germany, they're rebelling now. This is not France or England where they're even rebelling. This is the United States of America. 400 million guns in private hands and over 100 million gun owners. Militias all over the place, and the best militia to start with is the sheriff. Is a good sheriff, a good constitutional sheriff who can deputize pretty much every citizen in the county if he wants to. Okay.
Yes.
So that's the beginning of it because now you're acting under the color of law because you're all deputies at the time. So you could start locking these beds up for trespassing if they come in until you get other militias in line that could, really carry out some kind of rebellion. Because this is going too far. These people are asking for it, Mike. And that brings me back to Trump. The fact that he's working with these special forces people, the fact that they grabbed that server there in Germany, and the fact that Flynn, by the way, General Flynn was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency before Obama fired him, okay, tells me that Flynn is involved in this, all right? And I'm telling you, Mike, mind my word, if nothing else works, now I think the Supreme Court's going to throw this out because the way they're set up now, I don't know who set it up like that, with Justice Thomas in charge of Georgia, Justice Alito in charge of Pennsylvania, Justice Comey in charge, I believe, of Wisconsin, and what's his name, Kavanaugh in charge of Michigan. That tells me this thing is going to be overturned. However, if it's not, I think Trump is really looking for. You want to call it martial law? Well, let's call it a counter coup because this election is a coup. So do not kid yourself. They've been trying to overthrow this man since he was elected.
They're not overthrowing the man, they're overthrowing the nation itself.
Exactly. Look at the damage they did with the relationship we have between Russia and the United States.
Yep.
That's because they did that purposely, because the two countries that stand out that will stop the New World Order and that'll destroy the globalists are the United States and Russia. okay? And I'm glad Putin, by the way, is sticking by Trump now. I think that relationship is going to change radically if Trump wins, or like I said, he declares martial law, a counter coup, and holds a new election. That's what he should do. If nothing else works, you cannot surrender this country to these enemies, to these domestic enemies who stole this election. It's so obvious. Anybody in their right mind can see it. Even like I think you said before, 30% of Democrats even know it. This is not, he cannot let this go, Mike. He's got to stop this. And by the way, at the same time, he's got to unlock the country for crying out loud. Get rid of that emergency order and put these governors, these little Napoleons and Hitlers like we got here in North Carolina, put them in line. I believe the one you have in Indiana is the same way, and he's a Republican, supposedly.
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah, Governor Holcomb, but they're slapping down more COVID restrictions, and a lot of people are ignoring them. I was in a place we do business with on a regular basis today. Nobody was wearing a mask.
Good. That goes to show you people are rebelling. I even see in California, Orange County, had a big demonstration against this little creep there, Newsom. Okay, this subhuman piece of garbage. Okay, people are getting tired of it, Mike. But these people are too stupid. These globalist billionaire class are too stupid to understand. There's more of us than of them. The rank and file of the military is on our side. The sheriff, much of the police on our side, and of course millions and millions of armed gun owners. And even in other countries, they're starting to rebel. They don't understand. They're going to they don't know history. They should look at the French Revolution, what happened there.
Yes, they should.
Look even at the Soviet Revolution, what happened to the Tsar and all that. Okay, they should start paying attention. The people get riled up enough. Look at all the people losing their jobs, Mike. What a shame. Look at all the people, all these small businesses closed, while the big fat cats make out like, the predators that they are. And people aren't going to take this much longer, Mike. Really. I can't see this lasting myself. Look, I don't want I don't want a revolution. I really don't want something like that. It would be terrible.
I agree.
But they're pushing it. They're pushing the envelope. They're too stupid. A lot of them are inbred. Especially a lot of these globalists are inbred.
Mark,
okay, I understand. Okay, I see.
No, stay on the line.
Yes.
Stay on the line. I'm going to put you on hold. We're going to let you finish your rant when we come back from these words from our sponsors. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking with Mark in North Carolina. And Mark, you're accurate to say that there are a lot of parallels between what is going on in this country and what was happening in pre-revolution France. With today's modern technology and communication, though, things could happen very fast, like they did in Romania, where it was literally just 1 week between the outbreaking of a political rally and the execution of Ceausescu by machine gun on Romanian national television. So it is a very dangerous time. Now, I'm not advocating that, but as you were saying, it does feel like we continue to be pushed and pushed and pushed, and it's like, at some point there's going to be a breaking point.
Yeah, and a lot of these globalists, like, for instance, the British royal family and others, the Rothschilds, these are inbreds. That's why they're so dumb. They don't understand the people, we the people. They don't understand what we are capable of doing to them more than what they're capable of doing to us. I don't care how much of the internet they shut down. We have ways of communicating with each other, even if we have to do it on shortwave radio.
Yes.
They don't understand this, Mike. This is the problem. And I'll tell you something. One of the ways we can defeat them starting and do it legally is confiscate their wealth. Confiscate these banksters' money. Like I just heard that song you were playing there. Confiscate Wall Street, so much of Wall Street wealth. Close down some of these big banks. Close down these tech companies. Start arresting people like Bill Gates. And I'm sure you can find some kind of charges on him. And Dorsey. And confiscate their money and their property. That's what you got to start doing. Break these companies up on top of it. All right?
Yes.
This can't go on, Mike. I would support Trump if he declared martial law now. It'd be a horrible thing, but it's horrible right now what they've done. They've stolen this election, period. Plain and simple. Anybody knows it.
Everybody knows it. Even the Democrats are admitting it.
Exactly. So I'll let you go now, Mike, because I know you got other callers online and all that. Okay. Hey, Dustin, I want to hear from you. You think it's right still with these masks? All right. Thanks. Okay.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Mark. We're going to switch over to Terry in California. Terry, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Mike, I called in response to Steve's comments about, taking the digital money out of your account.
Yes.
That means the government's got complete control over your paycheck.
Yes.
If you work for a small company, somehow it would go through the federal government. They approve what you do and what you don't approve, and they decide if they're going to give you money or not, pay or not. And I know excuse me, China, it's already in place. And the method they have is everybody's got a smartphone. They got to take their barcode or their QR code and run it across a machine to buy anything. So that means they control everything that you do. They know where you were when you bought it. They know how much money's in your account. They decide if they're going to let you buy that or not. So that's complete tyranny right there. And
it really is. And, there's another aspect you need to be aware of, and that is that if you have opinions that somebody in government doesn't like, there could be a mysterious computer accident in the middle of the night that simply empties your account. I mean, after all the cheating with computers we saw in the election.
But they're getting so emboldened that they don't even have to do that. They can say, just like kicking people off YouTube, they can say, your remarks are in violation to our policy. Someday it'll get to that. And then that's the scary part. But in answer to Steve's question, what can we do about this? It's going to be the thing that Bitcoin's waiting for, these cryptocurrencies, because no government's got control over that. And
well, I'm sure they're moving to gain control over it. I mean, they're not going to let that operate outside their control.
But can they do it? So the thing is, though, what they're doing, though, is monitoring, turning the IRS loose on people that aren't paying their taxes on their gain. And that's a double whammy, because the U.S. currency is going to deflate in value, and it's not going to be worth what it is today, obviously. So what are you taking your gains on? You're taking your gains on a currency that's deflated, and that's really unfair, But
I agree.
So the answer to this, they're going to cryptocurrencies to get around this, people are, and you got to get one like John McAfee says, Monero is going to take off because that's the one that's really private. They can't see the transactions. But with a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, you can see everybody's transactions. But that's the only answer to Steve's question. What can we do about it? Is go the digital route where you bypass the governments. And, of course, they don't like it. But I don't think there's anything they can do about it. Do you?
I'm sure that there is. I mean, it's all being handled by computers, and computers can be hacked, or the government can go to these cryptocurrency companies like they did to so many other computer companies and said, give us a back door.
Yes, they will. However, well, I got to think about that. I've been thinking about so many things since Peter called about all these ideas, what's the limit to different subject real quickly though.
Okay.
What's the limits of the commander-in-chief? If he wants to take the special operations group and pull it out for his own benefit, I mean, does he have any limits on his power? I don't know.
The limits lie in bureaucratic resistance. I mean, look at all the things he tried to do and couldn't get done because the entire corrupt machine was against him. And the one I keep going back to is, that he had 3+ years to deal with massive election fraud, and he failed in that endeavor and dropped the ball, and he's paying the price for it now.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a few things that he said he's going to do in his campaign that he never got around to. And that's one that's coming back to bite him.
Yes.
Okay, Mike, we don't have a lot of time left on the show, so I'm going to turn it over to somebody else.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the call, Terry. And we're going to go to Kelly in Austin. Hello, Kelly. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Mike. Good discussions today. As you watch Biden nominate people or for his cabinet, and you hear comments from other people associated with him, it should be painfully obvious that this would be an administration that is hell-bent on waging war against half the population. And if you don't think that that's not motivation for civil war, a spark for civil war, you're crazy. I listen to these people open their mouths, and I say, keep talking, because you're going to set off a spark that will absolutely set you off in flames. But it's very clear they intend to wage war against half the population of this country.
Well, there was an article we posted at What Really Happened.
What do you expect the reaction is going to be?
Well, like I said, there was an article that I posted at whatreallyhappened.com where this art critic, I don't know what qualifies him to make these comments, but this art critic said it's time for Republicans and conservatives to go away, even if it means a campaign of repression.
Oh, yeah. Well, I called you last week and said that I had heard that from several sources, and then right out of the horse's mouth, AOC herself, that, we need to have truth and reconciliation commissions. We need to limit the access of conservatives to the internet, or maybe even strip their access to the internet. We need to confiscate their guns, or we need to tax the hell out of what firearms they have, which should backfire on them. Half of my firearms I bought through private sales. The other half I got through gun shows and whatever else.
Yeah.
And I'll unload those firearms that I bought in gun stores and at gun shows, and I'll keep the others because they can't trace them to me.
Yeah.
I might keep one so they can tax me on that, just to say, okay, I paid my tax. But that in itself would be enough to make people, I think, angry enough to start fighting back. But then other things as well, such as these proposals to have our Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. You know where you saw that? South Africa. How did that work out?
No, it didn't work out very well at all.
No, it hasn't worked out at all in South Africa, and they won't work out any better here in this country.
Okay.
People better wake up. As I told you last week, this country has become an idiocracy. Every time I hear someone associated with Biden open his mouth, or every time I hear Biden open his mouth, it's very clear to me that that's exactly where we are.
Yes.
Okay, Mike.
The dumbing down of the population has reached the highest heights of the Democratic Party, and I think, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez herself is an example of how the system has really failed. Instead of having the best and brightest working in our government, we've got an ex-bartender.
Yeah, I know. People try to say, well, just because she was a bartender doesn't mean that she's not qualified to be in Congress. Well, look, we've had other idiots in Congress too. Good Lord, who's that idiot Hank Johnson from Georgia, who tends to think that the islands of Guam would tip over, and you got
I remember that
maniac out of Los Angeles, Maxine Waters, and others. I mean, it seems to me that we send people to Congress, a large number of people to Congress, who would be lucky to be employed in the private sector. Seriously.
Well, that may be why they ran for Congress, is they couldn't find honest employment.
I'm sure, I'd like to see them all out of work, to quote Joe Biden, learn to code. Pull them out and tell them to learn to code.
Yeah, I understand PHP is kind of popular right now.
Pardon? I didn't hear that.
I was just saying I understand PHP is kind of popular right now, although apparently NASA is hiring older programmers who know Fortran to update some of their hardware now.
I'm not surprised.
Yep.
Anyway, Mike, this has been a good show today. I've enjoyed the comments, and so I look forward to hearing what other people have to say. So thanks for taking my call.
Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Ken in New York. Hello, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today? Ken in New York, are you there?
There we
Ken?
go.
There we go.
Yes,
Now
I'm
I
here.
can hear you.
I'm here.
I was about to put your face on a milk carton.
Oh, no. I have a solution to a problem that I think would work very well, and it would frost the ball bearings of the few media companies that own everything. Reinstitute the Fairness Doctrine.
I would certainly like to see that happen, but you're going to see all the corporate media companies out there saying, "Oh, we abide by the Fairness Doctrine." Really, it's just up to us to decide what truth the American people should be exposed to.
Well, the lawyers would have a field day with it because there was a whole practice of law dedicated to adjudicating these matters.
Yes. Okay.
Yep, that's it.
That's it. All right. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Jeff in Utah. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello? Good day, Mike.
Hello. You're on the air.
Yes, the last caller said the Fairness Doctrine. I got a better one. How about overturn what Obama overturned and have Trump bring back the Smith-Mundt Act so they couldn't put propaganda on the American people with every word out of their mouth?
I would agree with you on that one, but the fact is that they've been propagandizing the American people since before it was legal. And a good example of that, of course, goes back to, yesterday was the anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and looking at the media from the time, the lies are absolutely transparent, coming from the magazines and the TV broadcasts of the day. So they've been doing this stuff all along. Americans are the most lied to people on the face of the earth.
Without a doubt, they are. And also, another thing I want to get to now, Pfizer demanded emergency use of their vaccine, and they want it authorized right away. Who gives them a right to demand anything? They're a private corporation. How do they get to demand to put a deadly vaccine in people that they're rushing to market? The reason they're rushing it is because the people are starting to wake up. All the people I talk to now are saying they're not going to take it. So they're freaking out. They're trying to get it out as fast as possible.
Well, they want to beat the other vaccines to market because they see huge profits in that. There's Moderna's vaccine is about ready to be approved. There's another third one that looks like it's about to be approved. And, Pfizer understands whoever gets to the marketplace first is going to make the lion's share of the money.
What about when the people start dropping dead? Then what will happen?
Well, they go over to the vaccine injuries court and they get a small stipend, for the loss of a loved one. Vaccine companies are indemnified against civil litigation. If you are harmed by a vaccine, you have to go to the vaccine injury court. And they're generally not sympathetic, but they've still paid out about $4 billion in settlements.
Yeah, but that money comes from the taxpayers, not from the corporation. So they have no reason at all to make a safe vaccine because they're not liable, and they haven't made a safe vaccine. They've rushed it, and we know what happens when you rush things. Things go wrong.
Yes.
I've been reading about what's in these vaccines. It would horrify you if you saw what was actually in them.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And, again, I see a lot more people going back to 1976 and the mandatory vaccine program there that killed more people than the flu did.
Yeah, the Spanish flu of, was it 1918?
Yes.
More people died because of the vaccine than from the flu itself.
Yes, they did.
Also, I want to respond to Steve Elkins. He was saying everybody's talking about cryptocurrencies. Those were all developed by DARPA and the CIA, so they have a backdoor into all that. And they'll either make it illegal or they're going to go in and take the internet down. They'll figure out a way to cut that out. So what you need to do, everybody needs to do, is go back to God's money, which is gold and silver, which he buried deep below the earth to make you have to do a hard day's work to earn that, and go back to silver and go back to bartering, because you got to be outside of the system in order to stay away from the vaccine. So buy silver now. It's on sale. It's very cheap. If you can afford gold, I would get gold or other metals to get out of the system.
You know, but we may see the government ban ownership of gold and silver. I mean, they did it when Roosevelt was president. Anyway, we have to take another break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, and we'll be back with more phone calls in the last segment of our program. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our program on this Monday, and we're going to go back to the phones to Bobby in Florida. Hello, Bobby. Thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. I didn't think that Trump would lose this, that they get away with doing this. I was kind of hoping secretly that he'd win, even though I don't like his character, I don't like his personality and all the pedo stuff, you know. But then you got pedos on both sides. We always talked about that, you know. I don't care if he gets mad, but I've just seen so much stuff that, you know, I judge people by their character too, you know. But it seems like he was a nice big life raft, a big orange life raft for the last 4 years. We haven't gone to war or anything, and you got to look at the, you know, the good things that if they let him not go to war, or you know, who's controlling him, who knows? I know 3 people who got my singer in my band. He come down with the antibody. His girlfriend got the coronavirus, and she got on Facebook and told everybody, and that crashed my band, so we couldn't play. Everyone's afraid of us now. But he got the antibody. I think the antibody proves that he had it before or something like that. I don't know. If you got the antibody, it means you had it before. I think he had it last year. But it's just a flu. I mean, or like a cold. I mean, they're getting over it. It wasn't that bad. A few days of it were bad. His girlfriend went to the hospital. But it's, you know, you've probably heard these stories before. It's just a cold, you know.
Yeah, it's just another flu. I mean, it certainly did not turn out to be the monstrous slate wiper that we were all told it was going to be. I mean, you know, when you talk about a pandemic like in history, you know, and you're talking about piles of bodies being burned in the streets to, you know, to sterilize them and get rid of them. And yes, you know, we've had like 5,000 deaths here in Indiana, supposedly from COVID-19. But when you compare that to the population of the entire state, you begin to understand that this virus just isn't that lethal.
Right. Yeah, my brother had it too, and he said, "Man, this is crazy." Because he was really afraid at first because, man, I'm going to die. I felt like I was going to die when I was a kid when I had the flu. It's just you feel like you're going to die, and they say you can't smell. My friend, he goes, I can't smell, I can't taste. I go, well, have you got the runs? No. I go, well, you know, when I've had a cold, I couldn't smell or taste either.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't smell or taste anything. I remember not tasting anything when I was a kid. I've got a flu a few times, but not when I was an adult. But anyway, what else was I going to tell you about? Shoot, I forgot. I'm buying a Honda. Does this sound good? $5,000 for a Honda Civic. Is a 2012. It's got 104,000 miles on it. Probably a stupid question. Good deal, huh?
Yeah, well, I would say so. I mean, we certainly like the Honda that we had. We like our Hyundai better. But, you know, the production quality comes and goes, and you really need to look for some online references about that specific model here. Anyway, Bobby, we're going to let you go.
I'll let you go. Okay.
All right, and we're going to try and cram Dan in Washington State in before the end of the show. Dan, make it quick. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. All right, I'll sum it up. The other callers had good points. The Fairness Doctrine, I think, should come back, and the vaccine regulation liability, and those were all, and the defunding of NPR did not turn out to be a good thing. So the caller from Canada, don't complain about having to pay a NPR tax, because as we have seen here in America, the Republican Party that always complains about government this and the libertarian government that, well, when you take the government funding out of it, all it's replaced by is basically Wall Street, Zionist, globalist, foundation.
Dan, I'm sorry. We're at the end of the show. I got to let you go. My apologies to those callers who are on hold. Please try and call back tomorrow. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Spread the word of Republic Broadcasting. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com on what remains of social media. Please donate. We need your help, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.